Get 6 months of local news for just $2. You get unlimited access to the news and information you need to stay connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to get 6 months of local news for just $2.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right? You know, the idea of presidential libraries wasn't something that was normal, the norm, the tradition in the United States from the beginning. It's actually something that started later. Now, of course, I'm saying this in the context of North Dakota getting a presidential library for Theodore Roosevelt, who wasn't from North Dakota, but as North Dakotans like to remind everybody, had some pretty formational moments in our state. And now we're building his library, because he didn't have one before, in Medora, and we're going to get an update on that. Matt Briney is on. He is the Chief Communications Officer for the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library. And I want to say, because Matt actually has a background in presidential libraries. He actually worked previously at Mount Vernon, which is the President George Washington's library, which obviously wasn't developed in his lifetime. Mount Vernon was his home. But that was developed. And actually, Mount Vernon's not that old. Like in terms of being established as a presidential library, that was relatively recent.
That's correct. Yeah, Rob, great to be with you, and great to be with all the listeners. Yeah, George Washington's Presidential Library is really just about 11 years old at this point, and that's common because the presidential library system really begins with FDR. That's the first federally recognized National Archives library. Every president after that, is offered through the National Archives the ability to establish a presidential library. It typically also involves, a foundation that also helps to have to fundraise for that. But presidents before that were never really given the opportunity. The National Archives never went back and said, hey, we should establish. And so as a result, it requires that state historical societies or private foundations step up to build these facilities. And, my time at George Washington's Presidential Library shows that it is worth going back in our history, especially even after, the individual has passed, to go explore what life was like at that time and how the policies and decisions that they grappled with impact our lives today.
I was actually I wanted to see if I could stump Matt, who had the first unofficial presidential library before FDR.
Well, you probably are going to stump me on that one, but
this is why people don't want to come on the show, Rob.
Yeah, it was Rutherford B. Hayes, and I have to admit, I only knew that because I was Googling about presidential libraries before the show. But Rutherford B. Hayes, yeah, I set up.
Good job, Rob. Very, very proud of you. Your ability to use the Google to show off on the show today. Matt, can you give listeners an update on how's construction going? How are you going to fill the library? When can people expect to be able to visit the library?
Yeah, so construction's going great. Anybody who's been driving past I-94 has probably seen it. It's had its green insulation exposed, which makes it very visible from Theodore Roosevelt National Park and the highway. But we've got the superstructure is complete. The team's been working hard on the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. That's almost complete. We've been pouring floors. And we're starting to install drywall. We're planting on the green roof of the library. So, it is really coming along as a building. And what's really exciting is we've actually also begun fabricating the exhibits that will be going into the library too. So we're right on track. As I like to tell everybody, the paint might be wet, but we're looking forward to welcoming everybody July 4th, 2026, when we will open to the public.
One of the things during the legislative session, there was a bid for some additional funding for the library. I think another $50 million that ultimately got removed from Senate Bill 2018. Did that cause any problems, or did you guys have to compromise the construction at all for want of that funding?
No issues at all. I mean, we are always grateful of the support that the North Dakota legislature has provided for it. About 11% of the project is funded from state funds. That's really out of an endowment that doesn't come into effect until we open the doors. It's a $50 million state endowment. And essentially that remains in a bank, and then we will draw on it will gather interest, and we will draw a very conservative pull off of that. In the early days, I mean, $50 million is not a complete operating endowment. Most institutions of our size, about 150 million is what you would expect. If you go to other presidential libraries of similar caliber, you're going to find similar kind of endowments. And so what we had also a generous opportunity from the state to have a $70 million line of credit. We've not tapped that to date, and so that was the bill that went through the legislature was say, hey, could we convert part of that line of credit to a additional $50 million? But it was also pending the fact that we would raise another another 50 million on our own through private donations, and so ultimately. It wasn't right for the state at the time, and the legislature recognized that, and that's fine. But it's not stopping us. We've got a tremendous amount of generous donors, patriotic individuals in North Dakota and around the country that have stepped up to help this fund this project. And there's going to be even more. We're just in the early stages of even filling out names of spaces within the museum. So it's a great time to come approach us as we move towards our final year of construction and preparation.
So, Matt, obviously the two different funding pushes for the library have been controversial at the legislature, the initial one and then the one this last session. And I actually was at the Carter Presidential Library probably a month ago. It's a beautiful place. If you're ever in Atlanta, go check it out. And been to the JFK Library, and I think they're both great facilities. But I could imagine people in Fargo, North Dakota, in the eastern part of the state that are like, Medora is like a different world from where we're at in Fargo. Why do I benefit as a taxpayer in North Dakota by having this facility here? And I will say, the Carter Library was great, but it wasn't like there was people busting at the seams. There's lots of room to walk around. So why is this beneficial to this state? Why is this beneficial to the taxpayers?
Well, I think that there's only a few places. This is like an NBA stadium, or there is only so many places where presidential libraries are put. I would argue that there's no presidential library that is adjacent to a national park, especially one that's named after the individual for whom the library is for. And that's what really makes our library unique. I think of all the presidential libraries, most being built on a college campus or in a major metropolitan city, we're going to stand out for being very, very different. Whereas it's as much about coming in, learning about TR, and learning about how he what became who he was, and returned to public service from his time in North Dakota. As it is as much to get out into the Badlands, enjoy the North Dakota plains and what surrounds you. And so I do think that this is it's going to drive a tremendous amount of tourism, increased tourism. We're already planning, bus routes and additional things that will get people to think about, not only visiting Rushmore, but also, coming to the library, visiting our national parks around the area. So that we really see the next kind of big, great American road trip going through North Dakota, Minnesota, and the western states as well. And so I think that there's a tremendous amount of opportunity. The other side of it, it will be the academic prowess that I think it's going to bring. I mean, what we are doing with our partnership with Dickinson State University and the Theodore Roosevelt Center there, to take all of the papers that they've been collecting across all the different institutions, the 18 different institutions, 33 different collections of repository of TR's papers, and make them accessible. TRC has already been making them accessible by digitizing and putting them online. We have a partnership with Microsoft that's really going to be able to take this and apply a level of AI, which is going to, for researchers and for school children and for teachers, this is going to make finding those materials a whole heck of a lot easier. And you can be doing it from your couch, from your house, from your school, anywhere you are, as well as at the library. And so there are ways that I think we can really the state's going to benefit. I think also programming and who we're going to be able to bring to the state, to the library, groups that'll come here, and spend economic dollars in our surrounding area. I do think it's going to be a huge benefit to the state. If whether you're in Fargo or Medora or Dickinson or Bismarck, I mean, I think that this is a great pride for North Dakota to have a facility like this and be one of the few states that can say that.
I think a lot of people, and we've seen the debates. We've heard the detractors, saying what's the point of this? It's who on earth. And I think the thing you have to realize about something like this is, I get it. Not every tourist wants to visit a presidential library. I do. I've been to the Reagan Library in Simi Valley, California. It is fantastic. It is fantastic as an attraction. They have they have the Air Force One that Ronald Reagan flew around in there that you can go walk through it. So unbelievable. I saw a draft copy of the president's speech at the Brandenburg Gate, complete with his handwritten edits, where he put back in, his speechwriters didn't want him to say it, he put back in, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. That was amazing to see. They had a portion of the Berlin Wall there. While I was there, they also had a traveling exhibit of the Magna Carta, which I didn't even know was going to be there. And it was unbelievable to see this document that underpins so much of what we understand about modern society. So, I mean, I think both the tourist effect, there is a type of tourist that wants to see this sort of thing. And I think also what doesn't get underlined enough in this is the academic mission of these libraries. I think sometimes we take it for granted. You see a production of something like Hamilton, right? And it's wonderful and it's entertaining and it's funny and it's heartrending. And you don't understand that art like that comes from an academic underpinning. And that just doesn't happen, right? The books that get written, the work that gets done, the artifacts and papers that get preserved, it takes somebody to do that. And, to date, Teddy, I mean, there's obviously a lot of good academic people who have done work with Teddy Roosevelt, don't get me wrong, but this is an organized, now central point for this very important figure in American history. This is hugely valuable. Also, I'm looking today at Tasha, my colleague Tasha Carvel's story in the forum about the Showstopper wall. It's a rammed earth wall being installed. This place is going to be an architectural wonder too. So also architectural nerds, in addition to presidential nerds, architectural nerds are also going to be coming and checking this place out.
Yeah, Rob, you're absolutely right. And I would say the academics scholarship is what's really going to be amazing. I think that this is something, what we're talking about with our project to digitize and AI and make it accessible through AI papers about TR is be able to find those things, be able to find those little details. You can be able to ask a question now. What did TR think about, conservation of forests, right? And have it identify both his own primary sources as well as, and we're adding more and more authors on a daily basis, biographers that have written about him. And I've seen this personally firsthand at my time at the George Washington Presidential Library, where they launched a book prize that was given out annually, $50,000 to the best book written the past year on the founding era. I mean, when the first time the library was open, I think we probably had, if maybe, two handfuls worth of submissions to that. In the year that I left, which was then 10 years after the program had been running, there were over 190 submissions to that. So the amount of access and scholarship to these papers, they exist in archives, right? They exist. Sometimes they're not digitized, they're not transcribed. Sometimes the metadata on it isn't complete. And so that makes it makes it an author who wants to write a book about TR, it's really difficult for them to go in. They have to pull out boxes, they have to find those materials. So digitizing that and making it accessible and making it to where you can do it from wherever you are, from your university where you're teaching class to your home, to your beach home, right? Whatever these that will be accessible to all, and not just researchers, but teachers, students, writing those papers. I mean, it's going to be an amazing tool. And that's what presidential libraries do. I mean, the point of libraries is to make accessible to the public these materials. And so that's what we take very serious as part of our mission, equally as among the tremendous exhibits we're going to have, which I can speak a lot more about what the experience will be. But the scholarship is really amazing.
Matt, it's interesting talking about the scholarship. I just had lunch with a friend 10 days ago, a colleague from 20 years ago who was in North Dakota at the archives at the Heritage Center researching a project. I guarantee he would have rather been at his office looking at his computer than down in the basement of the archives digging this stuff out. So I think that is a big deal. But I do want to hit on the exhibits a little bit. Rob brought up the Reagan Library. I haven't been to the Reagan Library, but when I think of the Reagan Library, I think of Air Force One, right? You see the pictures, all the events. What's going to be that draw at the library here in North Dakota that people are going to walk away and say, that's the thing, or the thing that's going to be like, that's why I want to go there, is to check that thing out?
Yeah. So we've got 45,000 square foot of exhibit space. And it's going to be a chronological walk through his life. But it is a mix of what we're calling adventure galleries and narrative galleries. Now, your narrative galleries, if you've been to a museum, you'll recognize that. That's going to be your text on the wall. It's going to be your original objects in a case, and telling a narrative story along the way. But what we're excited about, and where we think that it'll be different from most presidential libraries, is the adventure galleries. So we're going to take you into his childhood brownstone in New York City. We're going to take you on the train out to Medora. We're going to put you in a campfire scene out on the Elkhorn Ranch. We're going to take you up charge up the hill in Cuba, and we're going to take you on the Amazon and in Africa, and to Sagamore Hill. And what I think most exciting is we're going to take you into the White House, TR's White House, not the White House that we know today, but TR's White House. So it's going to have the full kind of look and feel replica of being in there. We have an outside facade that you'll go through, and then inside there's going to be different activities to be doing throughout this. So you're going to be able to run your own presidency, pick your cabinets, pick the issues that matter to you. You're going to be able to go into our decisions theater, where rather than actually just punching things on a touch screen, you're actually going to be able to talk to TR, and TR is going to talk back to you. And that's where we're leveraging new technologies from Microsoft and to be able to make it to where you can have actual conversations in a group setting with him. And so I think that the Amazon, it's going to be this 4D immersive experience where video is going to be projected on 3 walls. You're going to feel like you're going down the Rio Roosevelt with him. You're going to feel like you're camping with him. You're going through all the struggles that he did in Cuba. You're going to be able to see what the action is going to be firsthand there. And throughout all of it, we've got there's a little bracelet system that we're calling Trailblazer. Trailblazer allows you to kind of digitize you and make fun your experience throughout it. So you can design your own campaign poster. You can put yourself in the photo with the Rough Riders. There's going to be really fun activities that you can do and test and challenge you along your way. And at the end, you'll tap your Trailblazer in our final gallery, and then that'll enable you to learn about ways that you can kind of continue your journey past just visiting to library. These are things you're interested in. These were things you gravitated to. You were really good at debating. You were really good at discovering, this particular issue about yourself. And these are methods and ways that you can continue to do that after your visit and be a better citizen and participate in our democracy. So there's going to be a tremendous amount of stuff that go through. We're very excited about opening it up to the public and getting the reaction of all that go through.
Matt, thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, guys. Really great to be with you all. And if anybody wants to learn more about the library, become a member, trlibrary.com is where you can learn more.
Matt, I've got another question. I'm sorry, Rob.
Yeah.
As you were going through that last part, I was thinking about how this is going to be so cool for kids. But I also know that sometimes hotel rooms in Medora are a little short. What does it look like in terms of hotel rooms, food on the premises, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so we're working very closely with the Theodore Roosevelt Medora Foundation and other providers in town to find ways to increase, the places where people can stay. We want to do that, in a way that, doesn't overdevelop Medora, doesn't change the historic charm of it. So we're defining smart ways to do that. I think the other side of it is Dickinson is not far away. Beach isn't far away either. So there are ways that you can also stay. We encourage the stay camping there. And so that's how we're working on it. We will have a cafe on site, mainly for, breakfast, lunch options for visitors that are coming there. We've hired a chef, a native chef, Chef Candace, who has created some amazing meals. Rob, Chad, we got to get you out to one of those in the future.
Now you're talking.
Yeah. But no, there's going to be a lot of exciting things around that. And when we do our restaurant operations, it's much going to be about teaching and education and classes that you can take and on foraging or cooking or ways to do work with local food provisions. And so there's ways that we're going to be continuing that programming through foodways as well.
Super cool.
All right. Well, now, Matt, we'll sign off.
Sorry. Thank you.
No problem. It was a great last question. Matt, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Take care, guys. Bye.
Hey, Plain Talk listeners, have something to say? Call or text Plain Talk with your questions, comments, or headlines you want us to cover.
Just dial 701-587-3141. Leave us your message or shoot us a text with your name and location, and you could be featured on an upcoming show.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I am in Jamestown.
Hey, Rob and Chad. My name is Tony. I live in Grand Forks.
That's 701-587-3141.
Call us, text us, vent, praise.
We want you in the conversation. Thanks for being part of the show.
Now let's get back to today's episode.
Chad, it's I guess I understand why sometimes the state funding for the Teddy Roosevelt Library has been controversial. I think sometimes it can be hard, and I'm not like being tongue in cheek or facetious. I think sometimes it can be hard to embrace the vision of these things and to understand why they're important and why the taxpayer should be involved. I think we should understand that, only 11% of the library's funding has come from state funds. They haven't touched the line of credit that the state of North Dakota has made available. I think it's been very prudently managed financially. Understanding, of course, the project's not done yet, but so far, all indications are it's been a very well-run project. It's moving in the right direction. Everything they're promising sounds very, very exciting. I don't have a lot of doubt that they're going to deliver on it. And I think this is going to be a fantastic amenity for the state of North Dakota that was well worth the funds that we put in. And sometimes, we really lean in on this idea that, it's got to attract a lot of tourists to pay off. I don't think that's true. I think there are cultural impacts. And again, I understand some of these things are hard to quantify. But there's cultural impacts, there's academic impacts, and of course the tourist impacts. Those all matter.
Yeah, so I agree with all of those things. I think the one thing that gave me a little pause last session, not the first time this went through, but this last session, that this idea of a $50 million endowment, came up middle of the session after the previous conversations about funding. They said, we're never going to be back here and asking for more money, and then they were. So I think that put a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. I also think it's sometimes similar to sports facilities, and how that can draw people to the community. And I mean, there's a lot of places that I go because they have a baseball team, and I spend time and resources there as well. Of course, the difference there is you're basically subsidizing billionaire owners rather than a cultural
We're
center.
giving money to billionaire owners so that millionaire athletes can play.
But I'm not a millionaire or billionaire, and I like to go to those places, enjoy those amenities.
I feel like they can pay for their own. I'm not.
I agree with you, and I will say, after talking there, I'm super excited about this. Right, I will be honest, I'm not a huge Medora guy. Every time I go to Medora, it feels like it's 140 degrees and dry and windy, and it's sweaty. I enjoy the musical, but that's after the sun goes down.
We go to Medora and camp, Chad.
Well,
and
we
have a delightful time.
I bet you do, but it's sort of. I think Medora and rodeos to me seem like they're always hot and dirty, and maybe my pamperedness is coming through. But this is going to be a great facility. I will tell you, going to the Carter Library, which is not going to be as expansive as this, was so cool, so cool. Like you described the Reagan stuff. It's just you see things, and it's just JFK's library is so cool.
Anytime I would, and unfortunately, the Reagan Library is the only one I've had occasion to visit. But I would tell you, if I'm within 50 miles of a presidential library, I'm going, and I have the time, I'm going.
I can't wait for Obama's to open up at the University of Chicago because it'll be easily accessible and it'll be cool.
Whether you like the president or not, these libraries are very good. They're good projects. It's a way of and also the libraries. Each president kind of encompasses an era, right? Of American history, and the library, certainly the Reagan Library does, the Berlin Wall and the 80s and everything else. It's important that era of history is preserved, and also I think the opportunities it opens in North Dakota. Places like the Reagan Library, they host, big presidential debates. They host big game symposia. Now, Reagan's a little more, obviously a lot more recent than Theodore Roosevelt, a lot more high profile, also being in California probably helps. But, there's a real opportunity to bring that sort of thing to North Dakota as well.
Yeah, it's exciting. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. I wanted to actually segue from discussing the library to a bit of listener feedback that we got. And by the way, our number for that, 701-587-3141. Send us a text, leave us a voicemail if you want to participate. Andrew from Minot is concerned about Congress proposing to sell U.S. public lands. Andrew writes, Hi Play Talk Podcast, quick Burgum and interior question. Congress is proposing selling a swath of Western U.S. public lands, which appears to have bipartisan opposition from my friend groups, especially hunters. Beyond discussing the land sales issue, is it just me, or will the Interior Department, National Park Service, Doge cuts, and these proposed public land sales torpedo Doug Burgum's once promising future ambitions? Thanks for considering my question, and have a great one. Now, first of all, I think there's something to be said about the public land sale, and I understand why some people are concerned, but I think we need to put this in the context of just how much federal land there is. The federal government owns title to 640 million acres. And if you go on a state-by-state basis, the federal government owns title to 84.5% of Nevada, 57.4% of Utah, 50.2% of Idaho, almost 30% of Montana, 42% of Wyoming. There's a lot of land out there. I think what is being proposed is selling off 2 to 3 million acres, and that's a lot of land. Don't get me wrong. It's also less than 0.5% of what the federal government owns title to. Now, by the way, I want to be absolutely clear that in that acreage number I just cited, I think like 80 million acres is land held in trust for our Native American friends. I'm a little uncomfortable describing that as being owned by the federal government, even though as a matter of law, the federal government owns title to, but that's their lands. Federal government has no right to sell that land. And also I don't believe, my understanding is that's not what's being proposed. But some of this other land, there's a lot of land out there that the federal government manages. I don't think that every acre of that land needs to be managed by the federal government. Now, if you want to have a debate about a specific tract of land and its historical significance or its conservation significance, I'm all for that. but I am not against this concept. There's a lot.
I'm going to talk about the politics of this concept because I think our listener hit on it. I've been hearing on my social media feed from high school friends and other folks, particularly people who live in Montana now, all political stripes, who are furious about this. They're sportsmen, right? They moved to Montana because they wanted access to these public lands. We've seen in Montana in the past where public lands and the idea of selling public lands is sort of a third rail in their politics, regardless of what party it is. So the bigger question of how does this affect Doug Burgum? You and I both know getting on the wrong side of sportsmen is a difficult political position to be in because those groups are strong, they're organized, they're vocal, and they're not partisan one way or another. They just care about being able to do the things that they love. So I think this is a mistake. I think that the Interior Department would be wise to be more specific and exactly what they're going to do. But I think even that wouldn't necessarily make sportsmen and women feel better because it becomes that slippery slope argument. I think this is
land. Maybe the land we like is next,
right? And what is it being sold for? Right? Is it being sold for some sort of development along beautiful public lands? And what does that mean? So, I understand that the data that you just threw out there is compelling. I think the politics of this is the sort of not in my backyard, sell somebody else's federal lands, but don't sell mine, is going to be politically problematic.
It was interesting when he asked about Doug Burgum's once promising future ambitions. And when Andrew asked that, part of me was thinking, well, which ambitions are we talking about? Because, Doug Burgum's Doug Burgum was central to why the Teddy Roosevelt Library is being built where it's built. He's talked about how passionate he is about Western North Dakota in particular, how passionate he is about these lands and everything. So there's those ambitions about, sort of the Teddy Roosevelt conservationist mantle that he has donned in the past. But then there's also his political ambitions.
Trump-aligned political ambitions.
Trump-aligned political ambitions. First of all, he's not going to... But the thing is this really a Trump initiative? Or is this just... is Trump passionate about this issue? Or are there just people in his orbit that are passionate about it, so it's a bone he's throwing them? I don't know.
Yeah.
The oil and gas people obviously want some of this to go forward because there's resources there that they'd like to access. I'm sure there's developers that would like to turn some of these places into, whatever, housing or what have you, whatever their plans are. What's really interesting is the cultural milieu. I didn't watch all of Yellowstone because I kind of thought it was a dumb show.
I watched 1 second of Yellowstone.
Yeah, I watched a couple of seasons just because it was so popular. Everybody's raving about it. It had its moments, but overall, it was very dumb. But the whole premise of that show is about this like conservative, very, very, very Trump-esque or Trumpian, massive ranching landowner in Montana who is fighting development, now of course the land he owns is his land.
Right.
But that's what he's fighting. Like it's his privately owned land and he's trying to hold this massive ranch together and there's developers and things that are chipping away and he wants to keep those people out of Montana. It's really sort of focused on the sort of politics that you're talking about, Chad, where it really crosses ideological. You have the tree huggers on one side, but then also the hunters and the ranchers and everything else. This is controversial. And I think it really comes down to, again, what land are we talking about? I think the massive amount of land, I think the federal government owns title to an excessive amount of land. And I think we could chip away at that. The point, though, is doing it in a way where you don't lose the trust of some of these stakeholder groups.
Yeah, and I think what makes this extra politically difficult is this isn't just like a political issue that people have an opinion on. This is a way of life, right? This is people who moved to Montana or some of those other states because of the access to public lands to do the things that they love and whatever. So I think it's more than just hey, I really wish we'd invest in this program rather than this program. This is people really seeing it as a attack on what they love.
Right. And not just people who recreate on land, people make a living,
Right.
From this land. And it's tough though at times, because on the other side of it, remember the Ammon Bundy standoff. A lot of that started with fights with the federal government over grazing rights.
Yeah.
This stuff runs deep, bone deep.
Yeah.
So
I do get a kick out of very conservative people who are fighting to make sure that the government owns the land so everybody has access to it.
The Ammon Bundy people were mad about the government restricting their access.
Understood. I'm saying about what we're talking about here, there's some irony.
And the thing is, I consider myself a conservative person who also, I love our national parks. I love, Yellowstone and all these things. I just think that sometimes we hear that the federal government's going to sell off some land and we think, oh, they're selling Yellowstone. They own a lot of land. And not all of it has special historic or whatever significance. But
again, I think perception becomes reality in these worlds. So you start hearing they're going to sell off public lands, and you're going to immediately, as a human being, think about the public lands that you love.
Right. Exactly. So anyway, that's an interesting development. Another interesting development, I think both you and I kind of had our eyebrows raised when Congresswoman Fedorchak sent out an email about Medicaid and the big beautiful bill, which I'm going to use because this is how everybody knows that piece of legislation. And what she's doing, it's an update, and what she's doing is kind of debunking myths. She's going down and talking about some of the claims that are being made and answering, with her perspective on it, which I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that. She's making her argument that is what it is. But it is interesting in the context of, we just had Earl Pomeroy on, who went through something kind of similar with Obamacare and the healthcare reform, where he was, desperately trying to explain, his perspective and why he voted the way he did as protests were happening. And ultimately he was voted out of office. Now, that is not me saying that Julie Fedorchak is in that same position. Although I think that the No Kings protests have certainly got a lot of momentum. One thing that's kind of interesting about that is the Tea Party was laser focused on a particular issue. No Kings is a more broader issue. If they're focused on any one thing, it's Donald Trump himself. But it is kind of interesting that she felt prompted to send this out.
Yeah, I think that the correlation that I heard from Earl's interview compared to the way Julie has talked about, Congressman Fedorchak has talked about these Medicaid cuts, is that when Congressman Pomeroy was talking about Obamacare, he's like, well, the public didn't understand what it really was. And Fedorchak is very much saying the same thing. The public doesn't understand what it really is. And, when we had her on, she said, it's not cuts, it's a slowing down of spending. The problem that she has is it's not just people like me who are saying it's Medicaid cuts. I'm going to read you some headlines. House GOP moderates tell leadership they won't back Senate tax bill over Medicaid cuts. Key GOP senator warns Medicaid cuts could spell political disaster. Oz nudges Senate Republicans to ease off Medicaid cuts. These are her partners, her party, who are essentially saying these are Medicaid cuts. And I think that's the problem. And I think that was the purpose of this email is they're losing the messaging war on the Medicaid part of the big bill.
They're even losing it on their own side. Because when I'm looking at Congresswoman Fedorchak's email, the first question is, because she does like a question answer format. And the first question is, did Republicans cut $880 billion from Medicaid? She says, no, here's the truth in terms of spending on Medicaid. Taking all the Medicaid program reforms into consideration, Medicaid spending under the House plan will still increase 25% over the next 10 years. Now, that's what she said in response to you describing them as cuts on our interview, during our interview earlier this year at the Blue Rider. Now, the problem, though, is she has other Republicans who are referring to these as cuts. And
that's exactly right.
That's the messaging war when your own side is referring, you're like, well, these aren't cuts, but then someone on your own side is referring to them as cuts. You're losing that war. Now, I think she's right. I mean, overall spending will still increase over the next 10 years. I think that math is right, but the problem is that that's not the public's perception.
Right.
Doesn't matter that the math is right.
I'll give you another example. Senator Tom Tillis, who's from North Carolina, who's up for election in 2 years, evidently was at a Senate caucus meeting where he showed a chart that showed North Carolina would lose $38.9 billion in federal funding, Medicaid funding, and that more than 600,000 North Carolinians would be at risk of losing Medicaid coverage. Again, when you've got other Republicans sounding the alarm about the political ramifications of these changes to Medicaid and how it will affect their state, she can send out all the franked mail she wants and all the emails she wants. They're losing this conversation. And I get it. I mean, she has a different perspective on this. And you can look at numbers in a lot of different ways, but like, until she gets her own folks wrapped around. And I mean, again, there's a headline of Dr. Oz, who's head of Medicaid in the Trump administration, who's saying, hey, back off these cuts.
Well, even if you start to look at some of the things that Senator Hoeven and Senator Kevin Cramer are saying, now that the big beautiful bill is on their side of the court in Congress, they're not. I'm not perceiving. It's going to be really interesting to see where they come down on this issue, but I'm not perceiving them as being super enthused. I mean, they're not going to the mattresses over this like Fedorchak is, and my perception is they'll likely come down on a more moderate position. For lack of a better word,
less deep cuts. Right. Again, I don't want to get into the cuts or not cuts. The changes to Medicaid are going to be they're going to hurt, right? I mean, that's just the reality.
Yeah. I guess, and to me, the larger question is maybe it should hurt though. I mean, where's this money coming from that we're spending on this? Is part of
that's too easy of a question for me. We don't need to extend the Trump tax cuts on the richest people. Again, I don't understand the political calculus of hurting working people.
That's not enough. That won't be enough.
Then it can start there.
Sure.
But to just cut taxes for rich people and then
it's existing tax policy.
But it's extending it. I mean, I mean,
sure.
You don't have to extend it. You don't have what's the point of having a sunset if we're just going to automatically extend it?
We should be honest and call it a tax increase because that's what it would be. And
sure.
I'm not against the idea that we need a combination of spending cuts and tax increases.
But you and I are on the same page there.
But I don't think that we can't continue spending the way we have. And the idea is programs like Medicare and Medicaid are an absolutely outsized part of the budget. So
then we should have an honest conversation about that. Right?
I think what Republicans should probably do is put some tax increase on the table to get some of the spending cuts to go down.
Yeah.
Or to get some Democrats on board, maybe with some of the spending cuts. And I would hope that Democrats would be willing to make a bargain like that. But I really think that's where this cutting out all the, is it a cut or isn't it a cut and all the and bickering and everything about it. That's what we have to do. We're going to have to make some painful cuts to spending, and we're going to have to make some painful changes to our tax code to raise more revenue. There is no other way that we're going to solve the debt and deficit problem.
Yeah. And I agree with that, but we have to have revenue on the table, as you mentioned. It can't just be cuts. And I also think we need to be thoughtful about our cuts. I mean, the folks in the state who are in charge of feeding the poorest North Dakotans are sounding the alarm at the SNAP cuts that are going through as part of the big bill as well. One of two things has to happen if those SNAP cuts go through, as Congressman Pomeroy talked about. I mean, either less people are getting that benefit or the state has to pick up that share of it. And again, who's paying for that increased state funding? It's us as taxpayers. So are we just shifting the burden or are we having real conversations about what we need to do? And I mean, geez, we're on the verge of war in Iran, or maybe we're in a ceasefire and another, there are other things we spend money on other than just social safety net programs in this country.
Yeah, no, that's true. Although right now I don't know if I want to cut anything from the defense budget give it.
I agree with all the stuff that's blown up in the world. I mean, just talk. I mean, you had I thought a really good column about being down in Wishick, and which, by the way, great shout out to Wishick sausage. Always a good move to talk about Wishick sausage.
Oh yeah, you cannot go wrong with Wishick sausage.
But I'm like, I understand the need to get nukes out of Iran's hands. I understand that completely. What I don't understand is the president saying we've got a ceasefire, and then nobody saying they agreed to a ceasefire. It's sort of like when who wasn't there some it's Michael Scott on The Office when he declared bankruptcy by just yelling, "I declare bankruptcy." That's what I feel like Trump walked out of the White House and said, "I declare a ceasefire," and didn't let anybody else know about it.
I don't know. I mean, there are indications. I mean, certainly Trump got some very nice comments from a NATO general. I mean, there's maybe some indications that this worked, and I hope it does.
I hope it does too.
I'm rooting for Trump.
This scares me.
I hope the buttons he's pushing works out. I would like to see Iran moderate and restore normal relations with the country, and let's find a way that we can live in peace. I don't want war, but I also know that the Iranian regime cannot have nuclear weapons.
Yeah, it absolutely.
And we even have discrepancies. I mean, the Trump administration itself is saying that the nuclear capacities was destroyed. The president did very florid comments on social media saying it was devastated and total complete victory. And yet we have an intelligence report saying the opposite. And now we have the Trump administration attacking the authors of that report or the people who apparently leaked it to the news media.
Didn't that intelligence report basically say we may have set them back a
couple months, something like that? Like the basically that it wasn't the total and complete victory. I mean, we heard them, but the problem is also that's a preliminary report.
Right.
We could have heard them. We could have devastated them. But the problem with saying, well, that's a preliminary report is, well, then what's Donald Trump basing his conclusions on? I don't think anybody really knows yet, and we probably won't know for a bit. And if we do know, we're probably not going to make it public. But
nor should we.
Yeah, nor maybe should we. But my level of trust in the Trump administration to tell us, to be honest with us, is next to zero.
Yeah, that's one of the problems right now. I mean, even with going back to the Medicaid issue as well, I think that there's just people who have a distrust with anything associated with President Trump because you don't know what's true and not. And it feels like there's a bipartisan distrust of government right now, which is problematic. With all that being said, I hope they took out Iran's capability of producing nukes. I hope it was successful. But I will be honest, when I heard that was happening, I got a little pit in my stomach because that makes me nervous.
Yeah. Well, it really does. Well, especially Iran is a state sponsor of terrorism. They sponsor terrorism against Israel. They've sponsored terrorism in other parts of the world. There's nothing to say that they wouldn't sponsor and support and facilitate terror here in the homeland, here in the United States.
So, Rob, you had a column up about sort of the congressional role in declaring war so what, like in this situation, what should happen? Like I always hear like congressional saying it's our job, but I don't know how you do what President Trump ordered the other night with getting congressional approval.
So I think what has to happen is Congress delegates some of its authority to the president on a standing basis, which is basically, you've heard a lot about the War Powers Act of like 1973 or something like that, where the president can make war basically for up to 60 days before Congress has to authorize it. And I think something like that is appropriate, where Congress sets out very, very specific roles for the executive branch, in responding immediately to an attack, because we can't wait to convene Congress. I mean, if we get attacked, we've got to act. We can't convene Congress. I understand that. The president, we need the president to be able to make decisions. And so I think Congress delegating some of its authority to the executive branch on a standing basis, saying under these criteria, you may act immediately, but then you need to update us, or we need to authorize going forward once we have time and put in place contingencies. Maybe if Congress can't meet, if it's that kind of attack where we can't convene Congress, in regular order. I mean, things like that.
I just worry that Congress is so partisan and so polarized that
that's the problem.
Can we even do the right thing that we need to do with that amount of?
Well, I mean, if we're going to talk about abuse of executive powers, you have to put some blame in Congress, because one of the reasons why presidents get away with abusing executive power is because Congress is dysfunctional.
Right.
And Congress is so addled by partisan loyalties. I mean, a lot of the Democrats that are upset about Trump striking Iran had no problem with Barack Obama bombing Syria. And it's the hypocrisy and vice versa, where Republicans who were calling it unconstitutional that Barack Obama was bombing Syria are now all full-throated in favor of Donald Trump doing what he did. We need Congress to set aside partisan loyalties in instances like this and act as an institution, act as the other branch of government that has checks and balances over presidential power, and also act in good faith, and don't just try to stymie the guy in the White House because he's on the other partisan side of the partisan divide, and don't just give him everything he wants because he happens to be on your side.
Yeah,
that's how Congress is supposed to function, and it's not.
On issues related to national security, obviously war and peace is going to be a partisan issue to a certain extent, but it seems like we can do better as a country about, politics ending at the water's edge. And maybe that's a naive concept that never was, but it seems like from my perspective that
I think we used to do a better job of it. I think we used to do a much better job of it, and we just don't anymore. Hey, do you want to end talking about some of this mess in District 25? Because when I first started, by the way, this is such a Rob Port political story. Like, this is where I shine, I feel like, is stuff like this, because it's so in the weeds and it's so crazy that this level of dysfunction is going on within the North Dakota.
Let's be clear, Rob. You wrote a story about the dysfunction in District 25 and predicted this would be problematic before Cynthia Schreiber Beck even passed away.
Right.
I mean, they're having this chaos before there's a legislative seat in play.
And now you have, obviously you have factions within the Republican Party. The populist faction is ascendant within the party itself. They want more of their own in Bismarck in the legislature. So this appointment of Cynthia Schreiber Beck is important to them. She was very much a part of the Normie caucus, moderate, traditional Republican. So for them, that's a pickup. But then also it's a seat on the state committee, which is very closely divided.
Yeah, the GOP chairman was one vote.
Yeah. So, this stuff really matters. It's an absolute mess because, and the reason why it's a mess is because so many people have been manipulating the rules and manipulating this process that there's no real agreement over what the rules are. A lot of times people aren't allowed to know what the rules are. So, the latest is the Senate Majority Leader, David Hogue, who is chair of legislative management, recognized one of the disputed district chairs who were elected in District 25 and her committee to make an appointment to replace Cindy Schreiber Beck. And she did that. And the Secretary of State correctly rejected that appointment. And by the way, kudos to Michael Howe, who's just doing his job here.
Well, and again, we talked about earlier people sort of being in their factions. Michael Howe is of the faction of the normal traditional Republicans, he still did the right thing.
If he was making decision purely on political calculation, he would have accepted that appointment.
Right.
Because that was a normie. I'm forgetting the name of the gentleman.
Harry Girder.
That's right. I perceive him as being very much in the mold of Cynthia Schreiber Beck would have maintained, the status quo there. But obviously Michael Howe is making decisions based on the law, because the clear reading of the law is they didn't have the authority to appoint that. But it's just amazing to me that this is not, sometimes this all sounds complicated and down in the weeds. This district reorganization stuff is not that hard. It is being made hard because there are people that don't want other people to participate, and they want to win these elections by manipulating rules as opposed to the traditional way, which is just convincing people and persuading people and getting them out to meetings.
Rob, when I was executive director of the Democrat Party in 2014, I went through a party reorganization, and I will tell you, we did not have any of these problems. As I assume my colleague, who was at the Republican Party at the time, also did not have these problems. This is a new problem in the last 6-8 years, maybe even less than that, that is specific to the state GOP. And we've had the same rules the whole time. It's just people manipulating the rules. And again, I don't understand. I mean, being a volunteer chairman of a district, I mean, I suppose you have a little bit of power at the state reorg, and in this case, a lot of power in appointing the legislator. But by and large, these are thankless jobs, and the amount of manipulation people are doing to get in these alleged seats of power is amazing to me.
Go back, for people who are interested in this, go back and listen to our interview with Governor Armstrong, where he's talking about getting censured by the state party. And he talks about some of the stuff that's happening down at the district level. Paraphrasing some of his quotes, he's saying, if your Wednesday night meeting is going to the wee hours of Thursday morning because people have made 200 point of order objections, you're doing it wrong. And if you're still counting votes on a district chair election at 2:00 in the morning, you're doing it wrong. And I think what's underlying what he's saying there is there are people who are using that as a tactic. There are people who are showing up and making this problem, this process, as miserable as they could possibly make it, because they don't want that. They're trying to drive out the people they don't like. And people will just throw up their hands and say, I don't have the time for this. I don't have the patience for this. I'm just not going to participate anymore. That's what they want. They want you out.
And let's be clear, even if it's being run normally, it's not a process that's all that welcoming to working families or excitement, because it's still boring. But then you have this, you go to a meeting and somebody's, point of order, bringing different resolutions or whatever. And, you only have the babysitter for so long, right? You only have, there's real issues here that people are manipulating the system to exclude people from the process. And it's weird, and people need better things to do.
And what it's in pursuit of is, again, something that the governor said is trying to use the state part, trying to legislate basically, or make policy from the state party. I mean, there's a belief that they'll get in charge of the party. They'll get in charge of the party at the district level. They'll get in charge of the party at the state level. And then from there, they'll tell Republican elected leaders, whether they're lawmakers or statewide officials, how to do their jobs. And they'll say,
ultimately, Rob, don't we need more people like Kelly Armstrong to say, I don't care?
Yeah, I think that's the answer to all of this is I have a mandate from the people. I stood on the ballot. I made my argument. I had an opponent. We debated. The people chose me. And so I'm going to give them my best effort. And I'm going to do what I think is right to benefit them. And then there'll be another election. If they don't like it, they'll elect somebody else. But this idea that nobody elected, I mean, very few, a very tiny number of people who participate in this process are who elected the North Dakota Republican Party. And really, those seats are what they're supposed to manage are campaigns, right? They're supposed to manage fundraising. They're supposed to manage the Lincoln Day dinner or the potluck or whatever to raise money to help legislative candidates win. They're not, so their job is not to straw boss, like their boss hog or something, straw boss the elected officials. That's not the job.
I did not expect a boss hog reference during today's podcast, but ultimately where we're at is until
Boss Tweed is the better reference.
Yeah.
Tammany Hall. I don't know why it said boss hog.
But until David Hogue, Mike LaFleur, John Hoven, Kevin Kramer, Julie Fedorchak, you can go down the list, tells the state party, we don't care. We're representing the people in our districts or our state and whatever. This stuff is going to continue. As long as there's some Republicans in powerful positions, U.S. senators or congresswomen or legislative leaders that keep telling the state party that they care, this is going to continue. Kelly Armstrong is leading here, and I think he's opening up a big old hole for a lot of these other folks to follow through and say, we don't care what you're doing. We're going to win elections because the people agree with us on policy and they like us as human beings.
And we don't care isn't about telling the voters they don't. I think Kelly Armstrong cares very much.
It's telling those 46 people who voted for Century that he doesn't care about those 46 people.
Not all 47, but
Understood. Yeah.
But I mean, frankly, and we could kind of flip the script on them, right? They're we the people, they're the outsiders. No, they're the party establishment now.
They're the smoke-filled rooms now.
They run the party. And so, this is, if you're saying I don't care, it's like, I don't care what the party bosses say. I'm serving the people. That needs to be the message.
And by serving the people, you're serving the vast, vast majority of Republicans as well.
Agreed. Well, that's it. Hey, coming up later this week, we're going to have Senator Kevin Cramer on. And we were talking about Julie Fedorchak and some of the messaging she's doing about Medicaid. I'm interested in what he has to say about some of that. He's also proposing a Golden Dome missile defense system for the United States of America. It's something that Trump proposed. It's kind of like, Israel has the Iron Dome to strike down drone attacks and missile attacks. Talking about something like that for the homeland of the United States. We kind of rely on those oceans on either side of us and friendly relations with our friends in Canada and Mexico to protect us. But it may be time. The technology is getting here. I think that's a really fascinating proposal. And obviously, there's so much going on in Washington, D.C. We'll talk to him about Iran. That's coming up. That'll be on Friday's episode. Until then, and by the way, I should also mention next week we're going to be off again. It's summertime, so we're taking.
Hey, don't say again. You make it seem like it's all the time, but yeah, again.
Yeah, again. Well, it wasn't that long ago. We took a couple week break. We're going to take another week break. I'm going to take some more vacation time ahead of the 4th of July.
We're going to celebrate America.
Celebrate America, because by gosh, this is a place worth celebrating.
Amen.
But Friday, Kevin Cramer. Next week off, then we'll be back to regular business. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk again. That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening.
This is why people don't want to come on the show, Rob.